Let's bring Steven on from the Athletics. Steven, now that we have the Super Bowl coming up this Sunday, and we and your colleague Jim Bowden had the article about realignment, changing everything, and people have been very worried about expanding playoffs. Do you think the NFL is going to be okay through all this time when they've expanded playoffs?
They've done okay. We actually just did a series a couple weeks ago looking at 4 of the potential expansion cities. I wrote about Portland and Montreal. My colleague Andy McCullough wrote about Nashville and Las Vegas. So interesting stuff to look at. Jim was sort of a companion to all that.
Yeah.
But no, I think expansion has worked out generally pretty well. Although baseball, it wasn't too long ago that they were talking about contracting a couple teams in the early 2000s. It was Montreal and Minnesota, and that never quite got across the finish line. But I think baseball will be okay.
Well, and I think we're going to survive. We're going to survive with a DH in both leagues because a lot of people were calling my show telling me baseball wouldn't survive that.
I guess my call didn't get through. I've always been a big proponent of DH. I grew up in Michigan watching Tigers teams that were bad enough with pitchers staying on the bench and not hitting. And so after a bunch of years watching National League games in Pittsburgh, I don't need to see a single more game without a DH.
I would always say, listen, high school, college, minor leagues, American League, everybody has the DH but the National League. Everybody's doing it down to high school, so relax. We're all going to survive. Very interesting how you mentioned it because Jim puts in Charlotte and Nashville. We know Nashville's getting a team. I do a lot of work with our A's Hall of Famer, Dave Stewart. His group already has the money. Everything's in set. Nashville will be getting a team. It's where will the other team go? Obviously, we're flirting with Vegas. Looking at how Toronto, the way Toronto was lumped in here in their group, because they're kind of staying more towards the Midwest than the East, as the Blue Jays, they were going to be with the group that's the Ohio group. They would be with the Reds and the Guardians and the Tigers. That makes sense because Detroit and Cleveland are so close to each other. You throw the Jays in there. But if you brought Montreal back into this thing, wow, that really, or you brought Portland in it, that would really change, wouldn't you say, how we look at the East or how we look at the West?
Yeah, that would throw a bit of a wrench into it. I'm looking at it right now on our site. And yeah, Montreal would definitely complicate things. I don't really look at Montreal like it's that realistic of an option. I just don't think the current group, having just written about it, the current group on the ground isn't real interested in having a full-time team. And so another group's going to have to emerge. Another potential ownership group will need to emerge if they're going to flirt with an expansion and collect an expansion fee and all that goes into getting a team and getting a new ballpark, which they need as well. So you're right. Nashville does seem like a more likely option there, and it does fit into this footprint a little bit easier.
We love your article where we're looking at the wild card era. And, I've been telling people the wild card era actually started in 94, but we had the labor strife, so we didn't have the playoffs. So our first wild card teams came after that, but it really is 1994 when it started. And, professional sports is a what have you done for me lately, but it's actually nice to go back and look at, okay, let's see how teams have done. And you gave it a scorecard. You got positive points. You got plus points. You're in the World Series, win the World Series, league championship, division, wild card. You get minus points if you stink. And if you stink for multiple years, talk about doing this, going through the process. And I got to think it was a lot of fun to do.
It was. I'm someone who loves looking back at baseball history and looking at things with a little bit of context instead of just the what have you done for me lately. This is something I first tried a year ago, and it was very popular, but people had some thoughts, some ideas. One of them was that winning the World Series was a little overvalued, if that can be a thing. So it was worth 11 points, where losing the World Series was worth 6. 5, I'm sorry. And in my mind, winning the World Series and losing the World Series, which is still winning a pennant, aren't, one's not half as valuable as the other one. And so that was one of them, was to sort of tweak the numbers values a little bit. You can look at those on the story as well. But the other one was people didn't want someone sneaking in with a wild card to be just as valuable as winning a division. So we gave a plus point for that. And then if you people want to address tanking, and they want to address tanking really hard, Chris. Like they want to if you ask the average if you ask like the average person how I should grade this, from the comments, they would probably say like -1 for 90 losses, -2 for 100 losses, -3 for 110 losses. And my response is like, how bad do you want the Pirates to look here? Because
Yeah.
they're already at -4, and if you get even more harsh, it's going to be it's not undeserved, but it's just there's going to be a hole they can never climb out of. So that was a little bit of the reshuffling we did this year, but I love it. I love going back in history and looking a bit. I was born in '91, so my baseball following lifetime is really kind of that wild card era we're talking about.
Yeah.
Last year we first looked at the 30 team era from '98 until present, and we said this year it makes a little more sense to go back, and we'll just credit the Rays and Diamondbacks or won't knock them for the time they missed. But it's interesting. It's really interesting to add in the stretches of losing, where if you lost 90 games in consecutive seasons, or 3 in a row or 4 in a row, you're going to get docked points. That impacts some teams hugely. My Tigers, who I followed growing up, who were horrible in my childhood. The Royals, the Rays, certainly at the start of their time. So that did add another element to the rankings.
Well, I like it because our fans are always, what have you done for me lately? And our fans will always be, yeah, but. Because I'll have to say, listen, yes, haven't been to a World Series in a long time. Haven't won one and haven't been one since 1990. Haven't won one since 1989. But you've actually been in the playoffs a lot. Despite all the hurdles and all the issues, we've been in the playoffs a lot. And their answer is all the time, but yeah, when we got there, we didn't do anything. And I go, okay, that's fair. But that's what this scorecard allows you to know. Like, were you surprised? When you add it up, we're top 15. We're in the top half, not the lower half. And obviously, if in any of those years, the A's would have made a run and maybe made a couple league championship series and made a World Series, we'd easily be top 10 and sniffing in the top 5.
Yeah, I was surprised a little bit as I added them up because so much of this was an exercise of consistent performance, consistent success, consistent failure on the part of a number of teams here, and you're going to get credited and you're going to get docked based on that. And the A's have been consistent, even if it's not as positive as people want. Early playoff exits are always going to hurt. They're going to sting. They're going to stay on that resume. And they're hard to shake. I mean, you ask the Twins similar things, but if you can be a team that over the course of 28 years, I'm looking at 90 lost seasons, 1, 2, 3, 4, and coming off of one currently, only 2 of those in a row. That's like some pretty livable baseball, I think, as a baseball fan. It's not suffering through 100, 110 losses, frequently, and these sustained tanking stretches. Tanking has worked, unfortunately, I think, for the game, but I think there is some real value to that. But I understand that fans would certainly like to have made deeper runs. That's sort of the next step, right? Once you make the playoffs, you need to learn how to make it deeper into the playoffs.
Yeah, you think about the Pirates being under 500 for 20 straight years. It's like, oh my God, I feel so bad for them. It's such a great baseball city. And then I think about the Yankees. Buck Showalter started this whole thing with the Yankees, and then a guy named Joe Torre comes in, and everybody, I mean, as you said, you were born in 91, so you don't remember this. You might have read about it or seen documentaries on it, but no one wanted Joe Torre. Joe Torre was like, wait a minute. This guy has not been successful as a manager. Put him back in the broadcast booth. We don't want him. Well, that didn't age well because next thing you know, it all turns around. This young core coming up becomes great players. You got Jeter, you got Posada, you got Mariano Rivera, you got Pettit, and then they got the older stars. And really in the wild card era, the Yankees have been to the playoffs basically every single year almost. I mean, it is their scorecard, when you think of just the wild card era, wouldn't you say, is truly amazing. You see, this is when you actually look at the definition of what's a dynasty in the dictionary. I mean, you're not going to have decades and decades and decades, but in the sports world, this would truly be World Series, all the different. I mean, they're in the playoffs every year. This is what a dynasty is.
Yeah, putting the scorecard together a year ago was just a great reminder of how ridiculous that run they went on was. And look, we can look back at the reasons that it worked, and a big reason is all the money they spent before everyone else was willing to spend that much. But I think the chief complaint I've gotten here is people would like to see more of a recency bias. They would like that maybe it be weighted in a way that a World Series today means more than the World Series in 1998 and 9 and 2000.
Wait, why?
Because they want this to be, they want it, okay. What people want is for this ranking to feel like how they feel about what the ranking of franchises should be, which is the Yankees are good, but they haven't been the best, right? The Dodgers maybe have been the best. The Astros recently have been the best, which true, they have been. And I included the rankings for the last 10 years, which say in the last 10 years, the Yankees are smack in the middle, right? They're 17th, I think, in baseball. So there, if you want your recency, that's what the what's what the Yankees have been in the last decade. And the best team in baseball has been the Dodgers. I think it's somewhat obvious to most people, certainly in the National League. But the Yankees, what they did there for this exercise, we can't discount that. And to make the playoffs 24 times in 28 years, come on, that's what any other fan base would absolutely go crazy for. But it's the expectation there, and it's not a pat on the back so much for them. It's the expectation, and I guess good for them that they've built that.
Well, it is kind of our society. Everybody wants everything now, and they want to see it now through the lenses of right now. But that just because you're great for 4, we want to call a team that's good for 5 years a dynasty, right? And it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, to be a legitimate dynasty, you look at like what UCLA basketball did for all those years, or the Montreal Canadiens in hockey, or the Boston Celtics, where you have a period that's well over 10 years. People don't want that. People want it now. They want to say a couple of years and you're a dynasty. It's like, whoa, a true dynasty is you got to be good through change, not the same manager, not the same player. I mean, the Yankees have had 3 different managers. They've had all these different players. They've had all these different guys, and to remain competitive in the playoffs, winning divisions, going to the playoffs it's amazing. And I don't care about the money. You still got to play the games. You still got to win the games. I hate the Yankees. We're Yankee haters. I just have the ultimate respect. Like when you look at the scorecard and you set the parameters, you set the rules, you said the wild card era, and that's what we have to go by.
Yeah. And I think there's something to a refusal to be an embarrassing product that some organizations have gotten, and some organizations I think have accepted that, you know what, we're going to put a product. The Pirates, who I've covered extensively over the years, have put themselves in a position where we're going to tank, we're going to be bad. The Astros did it and it worked. The Cubs did it and it worked. And there are teams like the Yankees, like the Cardinals are another one that said, no, we're going to be a team in the running every year. And it requires a lot of things to get there. And it's easy to say you want to do that. It's hard to actually commit to that. But for the Yankees to have not even had a losing season since 1995, that's something that's special, even with all the excuses people can give for why the Yankees did it, a different way, or in a way that not every franchise could.
Yeah, let's reward people for never trying to lose. Let's reward people who say every single year we're about excellence. We may not win it, but we're trying. There's something to be said by somebody who never takes a step back when they're trying to win, right? If you're trying to win and you take a step back, things happen. Injuries, age, bad luck, whatever. But the whole idea that we're going to applaud teams who go through a complete dumpster dive and basically diminish their brand, diminish their fan base, and then all of a sudden they get good and people want to say, well, they're the model. I just don't agree with that. I think we should celebrate, as you mentioned, the St. Louis Cardinals. They have been a model of consistency. The Yankee, the Red Sox, they've had their time, but for the most part, they've been good. I respect that. You have some franchises that have said, we're not going to go through the dumpster dive. We have too much pride to do that, and I respect that. And you know what? I respect that, just not from a baseball standpoint, but how you run your operation and your business.
Yeah, and another thing that jumped out to me when I was looking at these numbers was, like you mentioned, we were deducting a point for every consecutive 90-loss season. And the Yankees and Cardinals were the only ones who didn't have any 90-loss seasons. But there were 5 teams, and they were a little unexpected to me, that didn't get any points deducted, meaning they didn't ever have consecutive 90-loss seasons, which was Yankees, Red Sox, as we kind of expected, the Cardinals. Then the Blue Jays and the Angels were the other 2. Angels, for as much grief as they get, they have been consistently okay. We're probably only looking at, I think, 7 playoff seasons over the course of the years, but they're stuck in the middle. I guess the middle is not the best place to be, especially in this day and age where that doesn't mean high draft picks and all that. Blue Jays are another team that actually just hasn't made the playoffs hardly at all until 2016, I think, was when they got back into the running. But interesting to look at the teams that have had sustained okayness, and I guess success is one way to say it. But I'm sure they'd love for a little more, definitely some more playoff appearances, despite not having any deductions.
Well, the article is 2023 MLB Wild Card Era Franchise Rankings. Where does your team belong? We say it all the time as Zeno Saris comes on this show weekly. We have a lot of guys from the Athletic, and it doesn't matter if it's baseball, football, basketball, sports in general. I know a lot of soccer, hockey, but the Athletic is fantastic journalism. I think everybody should subscribe. I know people get freaked out about subscribing to stuff, but it is worth it. It's the best journalism we have going, and I respect it. Thank you so much for your time. Let's have you on again and keep doing a great job.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris.